again. Hello from Boise, Idaho. It's December, whatever it is, middle of December here, 12th or 13th. And I'm at the site of the Fort Boise Military Cemetery. This is one of the more surreal settings that I've ever been in, with the snow coming down, and in a very quiet place here. So, as you can see around me, if you can see these hills back here around me, it's also a place where folks like to come out. It's kind of isolated, just outside of town. People like to come out here and walk and run or jog and walk their dogs and stuff. Just hang out. It's very, very quiet. But this snow moved in this morning. It started snowing, I don't know, 9 o'clock this morning when I got up to leave to go over to the base to work. And it's been snowing all day. So, finished my job today at the base, and I'm looking at somebody across the way over there. They're looking for a dog, I guess, or a kid. They're walking up the side of that trail, hollering for somebody. Anyway, so you can see the headstones here behind me. This is an old cemetery that was moved here. It was moved here. All of these headstones, all these bodies, were buried over across the way, across town at what used to be Fort Boise. It was a military installation for the Army, and it was, I think it was, what do we say, founded or built in here in Boise in 1863, and it was that fort was built here when Idaho was a territory rather than a state. But it was built here because of the Oregon Trail that runs close to here. They were having problems with Indian insurrections, or the Indians were raiding wagon trains on the trail. So they put the fort here to put a stop to that. Anyway, the fort was here for 49 years. In 1912 or 1913, the Army left the fort for good. But the cemetery remained, and they remained there until they had a big rainy season, and they had it was kind of built down in a canyon, or placed in a canyon, and the rains came, and they had a large flood that kind of washed up all the bodies, flooded the cemetery. So they moved all those bodies, moved the entire cemetery here to this new location in 1913, and they wanted it placed on level ground. Well, they call this level, but it's built on the side of this hill right here. I don't know if you can see the angle with this. The camera can pick up the angle, but it is not. It's level, I guess, on a slope, kind of a level, but that ain't level. Anyway, yeah, they ought not to have problems with flooding at this point. But this is where they lie at rest now. But these are all people that were in that fort back in the mid to late 1800s, from 1863 on. Anyway, I came out here yesterday before all this snow started. There's quite a few interesting headstones here. There's one guy from the U.S. Navy. I've tried to figure out why would a guy from the U.S. Navy be at Fort Boise in Idaho territory. But the only thing I can think of is he was in transit, maybe going somewhere else, and he didn't make it out of here. Maybe he died. Maybe he was part of an Indian raid. He got killed or something. I don't know. Or got sick, come down with some kind of illness. But so one of the more interesting stories, and we're going to walk over, is a family by the name of Collins family. So they're kind of buried separately. Okay, all of these. There's 247 graves here. This graveyard is said to be haunted. I'm the only one out here. That's kind of creepy. In a pretty good little snowstorm. But it's said to be haunted. There's people that have claimed they have seen the spirits of children walking around out here. Well, there's infants and children buried out here, mixed in with the military personnel that are buried here. So there's been claims of a spirit of a woman. There are women buried here too. But the one we're going to see right now, we're going to walk up this little hill. We're at the gate, see? And they're kind of buried separately right over there. I don't know if you can see their headstones. But we're going to walk right up there, okay? But this is the resting place of Patrick Collins and 5 of his children. Patrick was assigned here. He was born in Ireland and made his way over to the United States at an early age. Wound up in Ohio, got married to a lady named Mary. It's kind of slick right here, but we're right here in front of their headstones. So this is their resting place. But so after he fought at the Battle of Antietam and some other Civil War battles on the eastern side of the United States. And then after the Civil War, he got transferred out here to the Idaho Territory, and where he lived for several years, became an officer, kind of was in charge of his own unit. But he and his wife, when he first moved out here, he and his wife and I think it was a couple of children at the time. Well, one of the children's name was Daniel Collins. Daniel died at an early age, like a year and a half. I haven't been able to find in any of my reading why he passed away, what led to his death. But I don't see Daniel's headstone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It must be to the right. But this is the headstones that we're talking about right here. This one right here. This is Jonathan Collins. Right there. And then there's a William Collins. Patrick is underneath the snow-covered tablet right there. I was here yesterday. You could read the tablet, so I'm going to put up the picture of this tablet, and you'll be able to see what it says. But it's got Patrick's name on it, and the name of the 5 boys that died while they were here. This is Thomas Collins, right there. That is a Charles P. Collins, and there's Daniel's. That's Daniel Collins right there. So that's the 5 boys. So I already told you that Daniel was born in Cincinnati, along with his sister Carrie, and then they were transferred out here to this base, to Fort Boise. Okay, and then so he passed away. I can't see the date on here on the tablet. It's written on the tablet. I thought I was going to be able to cheat and read off the tablet, but he was a year and a half. So it was sometime after. It was like 1865. Okay, so I remember that. Well, then they had 4 other boys in the time that they were in the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 years that they were here. And they had a scarlet fever outbreak at the fort. And at that time, they did not know how to treat scarlet fever. Scarlet fever is caused by the same bacteria or virus that causes strep throat. But if you don't know how to treat it, like today we can use antibiotics to treat it. Well, they didn't have that then. So, these 4 boys, Jonathan, William, Thomas, and Charles, they all died in a 1-week span. They all came down with scarlet fever at the same time, and they in a 1-week period they all passed away. So Carrie, the older sister, she lived through it, and they eventually went back to Ohio. Well, she said later, after she grew up, got married, became a mother, she said to her own children, and telling the stories about this place, she said that she could remember seeing her brothers playing in the yard on one Sunday, and then by the very next Sunday they were all buried at the cemetery. So that's how quickly the fever came on. It could, in a matter of 48 hours, it could go from not being there at all to you got scarlet fever, and in 2 days' time you'll be gone. So it generally affected kids from 5 to 15 years of age, but I think one of these boys here was like 13 months old, and the scarlet fever got him. So it was horrible. So they lost 4 boys in one day, or in a matter of 1 week. So after they lost those 4, they had lost 5 boys since moving to Boise, Fort Boise. So, and then Patrick, the father, he was killed a year or 2 later after these boys passed away. He was killed in an accident in a horse-drawn ambulance at the base, or at the fort. He was in a horse-drawn ambulance, and something spooked the horses. Some clothing that was hanging on a bush or a tree, something like that, spooked them, and the horses bolted. And everybody on the ambulance, or 2 or 3 other men, well, they all jumped off, including Patrick Collins. Well, unfortunately for Patrick, I guess the wagon was moving pretty quick. But unfortunately for him, when he jumped off, he went headlong into a rock and smashed his head into that rock, knocked him unconscious. He never regained consciousness. And the very next day, I think it was in November that this happened. So the very next day, he died of his injuries. So tragedy struck the Collins family once again. Well, it was after that point, I'll put up the articles and stuff that I found on all of that, but on my Facebook page. But after that point, that's when Mary, the mother, decided to take her 2 daughters, I think Carrie and Alana was the other little girl, and leave Boise, Idaho, and go back to Cincinnati. She'd had enough. That was a straw that broke the camel's back. You lost 5 boys and your husband. It's time to go. So they went back to Cincinnati. The other thing is, she was pregnant. She was 2 months pregnant with a little boy. They actually had, I think if I recall correctly, they had another little boy. So she went back with 2 girls, a little boy, and she was pregnant with another. So they had 4 children that lived through all of this. And it was horrible. I can't imagine, how rough life was out on the frontier lands like this back in those days. They didn't have medical help. If you weren't picked off by the Native Americans, you know, you had to survive the elements like this right here, what we're looking at. So, that's one story I wanted you to hear, wanted to tell you. And I'm going to play taps here. This is going to be my Idaho spot. I'm going to do it here at the Fort Boise Military Cemetery. And I'm going to do it for, actually, I wanted to tell the story here, but I'm going to go over and play taps for, there's a bugler buried here. I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to go over and play taps at his headstone. Anyway, I'll end my recording with that, and then we'll pick back up when I get my bugle warmed up, and I'll play some taps, and then we're going to get out of here because it's cold. Cold. All right, be right back. I'm going to put this on pause.